Okay, it looks like we are all present and accounted for. Next thing on the agenda is an update with JeffCom dispatch service. We have here in attendance Brown, the undersheriff. And I'm not gonna remember your names. I'll just let you all introduce yourselves.
My name is Jeff Streeter. I'm the executive director with JeffCom911.
And Jennifer Gustin, Operations Manager with JeffCom911.
Brian Wilkerson with Italian Defense. I was part of the initial feasibility study and transition for this. So
Okay, thank you all. We also have Police Judge Kelsey in the room. We have the director of Clear Creek EMS here. I'm not sure who's on Zoom, but we invited the municipal electeds who took part in this decision. Of course, they have their own ability to choose their dispatch center. And so if Police Judge Kelsey, if at any point you have something you'd like to say, just wave at me and we'll make sure that you get the floor. This was asked for. It's been about 9 months since the transition. Was asked for by the board just to check in on how the transition's going, lessons we're learning, as you guys get used to providing services in Clear Creek. I know one of the things we were very excited about when we chose to go with this transition is that you guys track metrics on your performance. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about this transition and how it's gone. And with that, I will pass it along to Under Sheriff Brown or whoever is planning on starting.
Did you have comments to begin?
Not to begin, no.
Okay.
So,
Well, commissioners and attendees, thank you for having us. As I said, my name is Jeff Streeter. I'm the executive director of JeffCom911. In a moment here, I'm going to turn it over to Operations Manager Jennifer Gustin. We have a lot of data we want to share with you today. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. Anytime you transition agencies in, and I'm going to harken back to when we brought the original agencies in, growing pains are inevitable. Did we experience growing pains with this? Yes, and I think anybody that represents any of the agencies felt some of those, and your constituents may have as well. That was commonplace when we transitioned back in 2018, the 8 agencies that came together originally. I will add that this was a far cry less than we anticipated, that we incurred in 18. These were anticipated. We knew what it was going to look like. We were able to make quick adjustments to it. I'll tell you one of the biggest things I think the hurdles for JeffCom had to deal with was training up to Clear Creek. And I mean that by the fact that we anticipated more employees to come over to us from Clear Creek SO at the time, and ultimately we ended up with 1. So we had to train up, which was not insurmountable. We've got some very, very high quality caliber folks working for us. So making that training capability within the radio channel itself, the call taking, quite honestly, was probably the most seamless of all. Taking a call and processing that call to the standards was easy. Our folks were trained for that. It had to deal more with the radio aspect. A hurdle nonetheless, but we're staffed on a 24/7 operation throughout and providing the service. We're going to cover what your call load has been, which I'll cut ahead to the chase and Reader's Digest version. It's very consistent to the numbers that Brian Wilkerson had arrived at when he did his original studies based on the data provided by the SO to us. So we're right within the margins of that very, very closely moving forward. It has been 6 months of operation, 6 months and 7 days of operate, a little over. We cut over to transition February 21st in full operation. I think that's when we cut the switch, right, Dave? Yeah. So we took it live from that point. The data that's going to be provided to you is through August 31st of this year. That's 6 months of operations to kind of give you the variables. And we're happy to answer questions, as I said, and any other concerns that may come up. But without further ado, I want to turn this over to Jennifer Gustin to talk to you a little bit about the numbers and other experiences.
Good morning. So if we want to go to the first page here, I want to talk about the call volume a little bit. On average, 911 calls that we get for JeffCom as a whole are at 684. Non-emergency calls average per day are just under 1,000 at 998. And then we make about 589 outgoing average calls per day. And that can be for 911 hangups, verifying information, getting more information for calls, making reservations for different types of calls, hospitals, mental health, that type of thing. Dispatch calls in at 483 per day. You have the trends there in the middle. They're kind of hard to see because they're small, but you can see the number is pretty consistent throughout the month. We currently have 118 authorized emergency communication specialists. Those emergency communication specialists, they answer calls and they dispatch calls both for fire and law, depending on their skill set. We do have a lot of cross-trained people that do fire and law at the same time. A couple benefits that were gained, I believe, to Clear Creek by transitioning, I want to speak to before we go to the next page. That is, we have an automated phone bot. We have dubbed her Jane, but she is a phone tree and she has saved us. She has received 189,915 calls in that 6 months that our call takers did not have to answer. They were calls that needed to be routed to either other agencies or other departments. That frees up our phone lines a little bit, a lot of it by the number, but 189,915. And then something else that we have is a Z app that has processed 5,844 calls within our 6-month time frame. The Z app is a reporting piece on our website. We also have a JeffCom app where citizens and even some of our partner agencies have gone in there and utilized that resource to be able to create a call for service. It drops directly into our CAD system and directly to our dispatchers to handle. Also eliminating some phone calls that need to be answered. We've been able to streamline mutual aid, and I can talk to this a little bit more farther back in the packet. Mutual aid prior to the transition, if we needed to ask for help from any of the Clear Creek agencies, or if Clear Creek needed to ask us for help, either through JeffCo or Fire and EMS, they had to pick up the phone and call or try to hail us on the radio system. Now we can do that directly in our CAD system without any delay in the service. We also have a quality assurance program, and it goes through our calls for phone calls, fire dispatch and law dispatch, and surveys the service. We have a certain number of, I guess, rules and qualifiers that each dispatcher has to meet, and they are scored on their call taking and dispatching. That includes their metrics, that includes their address and phone number verification. And also through EMD, EFD, which is the next thing I want to speak to, we follow the emergency medical and emergency fire dispatch protocols for liability purposes, and that is through the Academy of Emergency Dispatch. Anything before I continue on? I've got some more things.
Let me jump in here, kind of tag team with her. Currently, that 118 number, that's my authorized strength and emergency communication specialist. Prior to today, I was at 117, onboarded, staffed, not fully trained because we have just different transitional periods of that. We onboarded 9 more today. That puts us at 126. My board has heard from me throughout the year that we're going to increase our numbers. We just need to, based on these volumes, to maintain our metrics that we're going to get more into with you. I will be asking my board as part of my budget for 18 additional over this 118. That doesn't include our supervisors or other positions throughout the organization, management team, training teams, QA. So I'm going to drive that number up to 136 with authorization here in the next couple months. And there's no resistance that we can see through the data we need to. I just onboarded 9 this morning, starting our academy, which is very exciting for us.
We also have implemented a new phone system. It is through Carbine. With that phone system, we've also been able to streamline some processes. We have better location in that phone system. It integrates the location directly to our CAD. And it has also changed some capabilities inside the center. We no longer have call takers or dispatchers that have to sit at a certain position based on their skill set. They can change the skill set within the phone to meet their needs of where they're sitting. And I'll explain that a little bit more about the seating and how the dispatch center is set up. Through the process of the transition, we did have some areas where we had to change and adjust. One of those is with the paging system that we use for fire, EMS, and also Alpine Rescue. I Am Responding and Active 911 are two applications that we use. The Active 911 capability was different. I don't want to say it was less or more, but it was different coming to the CAD that we utilize from the CAD that was being used at Clear Creek previously. So our IT team went in there and made a custom-made CAD integration to be able to fit the needs of Alpine Rescue. So they are now getting everything that they need through that application from our IT customizing that platform for them. We're currently under 2 active accreditations. We've got the ACE Accreditation Center of Excellence. That's for our emergency medical dispatch protocols. We are also a CALIA accredited agency, which is the Commission on Accreditation for law enforcement agencies. So we hold 2 active accreditations, which basically sets a professional standard that we have to meet that encompasses community engagement, management processes, performance, and preparedness.
I think I remember asking this question last year. That's not common, right? For a dispatch center to reach that level of qualification.
It is not. The first accreditation we moved to was the CALIA. And although there are agencies around the country that have done it, dispatch was not where that was the commonplace. Law enforcement agencies have done it. Jails have done it more of recent. Dispatch is just getting a foothold. They go through all of our standards. They go through all of our policies, our protocols. And we have to meet a certain threshold within those and maintain those thresholds. And the best part of it is we have to show proof that we're doing it. We're walking the talk. So it is a very, very high standard. And I can tell you in the state of Colorado, we're one of just a couple in the state.
As a part of the CALIA accreditation, also they send members from their team out to randomly interview and spot check to make sure we are doing what we're supposed to do to meet those professional standards. Another special team that we have at JeffCom is the incident dispatch team. We will read a little bit about them and some of the wildfires that we have, but it is a specialized dispatch team, tactical dispatchers. They are also trained in wildfire incidents. So they go out on any kind of mass casualty incidents, SWAT incidents. They're on call. They utilize our communication van, which has 2 fully capable consoles inside the van, pulling some of the stress from our dispatch center and being able to be out in the field at the command post, getting line of sight communication with our commanders and whoever is there for the command post.
So you can have more real-time response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I've noticed that it does, I actually coordinate that team. And so it pulls some of the stress from the dispatch center because that incident is now being worked in the field from that dispatch van. They're getting less of the stress in the dispatch center from those bigger incidents. It also provides that better line of sight communication with those on scene. It decreases the delay in service. If there's something that comes up that they may need, they can ask their dispatcher right then and there instead of having to try to get to them by phone or via radio. If there's a lot of radio traffic, that can prove to be difficult at times also.
This vehicle is equipped with state-of-the-art technology. And one of the key components we see serving the incident command is the mapping capabilities. You can pull up very interactive live mapping right there on site and share that to the command post, where before it may have to go in, come back out. And they're utilizing that right from the side of our vehicle. So it's key.
And we also have a monitor on the outside of the van where when we work with the SWAT teams, they can utilize their drones and put that drone footage right up on the screen so everybody involved can see what they're seeing. We have a community engagement team. That is where JeffCom employees, supervisors, and dispatchers go out and speak to the community at events. They go to fire safety days, they go to celebrations, they go to recruiting events just to educate the community and work on some recruiting stuff as well at the same time. Last but certainly not least, I want to talk about the resources that we have for our dispatchers. We have a very robust peer support team, and they are trying to take that peer support team statewide to help other agencies this time. We have a sponsor program. So as our dispatchers are going through training, they are assigned a sponsor until they are completely signed off of training. They have that person there just to be a liaison and a support person for them. It also allows them to build rapport with that person. So after they're out of training, they still have that connection, that relationship with somebody who can help them through different processes. We have an employee assistance program to include therapy services. We have discounted legal services there, discounts through that program. We also have a clinical advisor and a chaplain that are available to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whenever we may need them. We currently have a health and wellness program where we reimburse our employees for wellness related items every year up to a certain amount of money. And we have an app for our peer support team. It's called the Mindbase app. So if somebody takes a particularly difficult call or is having a hard time, one of their peers can submit an anonymous tip to our peer support team and it'll say, hey, so-and-so just took this call. You might want to reach out to them. Keeps everything anonymous. They can go check in with this person and make sure everything's okay. There's also resources on there for each employee to include different meditations and ways to calm themselves when they've had a particularly difficult day. So I want to move into, if we want to go to our next page. So this is just a little bit of information about our quarry fire that we handled. This was a wildland fire that we handled on July 30th. We got the call at 9 p.m., about 9 p.m. With a grass fire. This fire generated 789 emergency calls and just under 1,000 administrative calls. We were able to dispatch 51 different fire apparatus and 200 different law enforcement vehicles to this event. The activity that these types of events create inundates a call center, regardless of the size. We're lucky to have the amount of employees and dispatchers that we have and rally the troops and get them to answer the phone. Most calls on an average have anywhere from 50 to maybe bigger incidents, 150 to 200 comments entered into the call. This particular fire had over 3,000 comments entered into one CAD call. That's a lot of volume for even a center our size. During this incident, we were able to dispatch our incident dispatch vehicle, and our dispatchers were able to support the operations at the command post. We've got 2 dedicated CAD workstations in there, and we were able to put critical information directly into CAD, relate to our fire and law partners. We also have capabilities on our website for Lookout Alert, which is the emergency notification system that we use. On our website, we're able to publish those active alerts. On the bottom right-hand side of this screen, you can see this is kind of a piece from our website showing the public where those alerts were, where the fire was, and what information was contained in there so that it can be referenced whenever they may need.
That was available to the public.
Yes, it was available to the public. Anytime we send out a lookout alert, it automatically goes onto our website and the public is able to see the block range or the exact area where it's at and what type of incident is there.
And that's lookout alert is something that citizens need to sign up for to receive. And once they're signed up,
Correct.
they get text messages about emergencies in their neighborhood,
Yes.
includes links to go look at maps and all the information they might need.
Yep, all of that. And that was transitioned over from what was previously known as Code Red.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. As of just a few weeks ago, we have created a new position within JeffCom that will be our emergency notification coordinator. We feel it's our job to go out and help you within your community and your residents, encourage them to register in that lookout alert. And felt it was important to stand up a position in and of itself, to help drive that registration. The more people we have within lookout alert, we've shared this with the sheriff's department, but they're too busy at times to get out and really beat the bushes. We've now created a position that'll help that. Attending community events, whatever you want, but they're going to be in there trying to drive that recruitment up. This is a safety issue. And it's imperative we're part of that.
Thank you. This is one of the most important things a citizen can do to keep themselves safe.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I'd like to move on to page 3. Some of the adjustments that we had to make when Clear Creek County came over to JeffCom was adjusting our radio system. We have Motorola and Harris radios in our dispatch center to support different agencies. We had to make some adjustments to the Motorola radio system. We were able to take a radio layout from the previous Clear Creek Dispatch Center and shadow that onto our radios. We had to go in and test those channels. We had to make sure that we had all of the capabilities that were previously there. That integrated our IT department on a huge level. We also had to make sure we had everything appropriately entered into our call processing equipment. So we had to import all of the county phone numbers and partner agency phone numbers into our phone system to include our officers and just resources that they were using, the court's numbers and administrative office numbers, the coroner, all of that had to be implemented into our phone system. We had to go through operational policies and SOPs. This was a very large project. We had to take all of the policies that Clear Creek previously had. We had to examine them and see where they were similar to the policies that we had. With being an agency that now with Clear Creek, we dispatch for 31 agencies total. We didn't want to go back from the standardization that we were pushing forward towards. So we went through those policies and were able to integrate all but 4 of them. 4 of them we had to create new policies for, and that was just things that we hadn't experienced before. So alpine rescue, avalanches, those types of things, mud rescues that we did not have a policy for before. We only had to add 4 additional policies. Everything else we were able to integrate, make some adjustments. And a huge part of this was communication. We had to communicate with not only Clear Creek as they were prior to transition, but also to our partner agencies. I made a lot of phone calls, sent a lot of emails, making sure our processes were appropriate before implementing those documents.
And that work all took place between, was it around October that we made?
October to February.
So that 4 months. I kept hearing from the sheriff's office how hard you guys were working to get that done.
Yes.
With that, once those policies and operational procedures were defined, we had to get with our training team. Now we had to train everybody to those policies. As I mentioned before, the adjustments were minor as far as the policies went. So the training piece wasn't necessarily difficult at that point. The piece that we were kind of challenged with is in our center, we have law dispatchers, fire dispatchers, and call takers. When Clear Creek came over, it was fire and law dispatched from the same console. That was an adjustment. So with that training piece, we took our dispatchers that had previously come from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, first. They were our first priority in getting them trained. Reason for that is back at the sheriff's office, they did dispatch fire and dispatch law in the same center by the same dispatchers, and they had that basis of knowledge that they could build from. So we got them over there first. We were able to get 16 people trained prior to the transition and through the week of the transition to be able to support the Clear Creek operations. Any questions before I move on to?
Under Sheriff Brown, how many people did we have on staff in the old, how many FTEs do we have budgeted? Do you know?
It was 12, wasn't
It's
it?
around 12.
There's 9 dispatchers, 2 supervisor positions, 11 total.
Okay. So before the transition was executed, you had 16 people.
That's just dispatchers, yes. Yes.
Yeah, during the transition, we were shorter than that. I think we were like at 5 in the process of going to this because the dispatch center that we had locally wasn't currently staffed. We were understaffed.
And so you were down to what again?
I want to say that we had 5 total with 2 supervisors working as what a dispatcher would be doing normally. So working a dispatch shift.
Total of 5, including those supervisors.
Correct.
So they were functioning as dispatch rather than supervision.
Correct.
Of course, there was less to supervise.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Fewer people to
Yes.
supervise,
Yes.
probably a larger hornet's nest, but
Yes.
yeah. Okay. My question is what, and I had a couple of them written down here and so I'll start with this one. It wasn't the first one I wrote down regarding, so you did direct and what do I want to say, proactive and outreach to existing staff in an effort to recruit them, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
To our existing staff.
We did.
We were already down, as you said, to 5 at that point. And what did you learn from that? You said you only had one person migrate over. What?
2 actually made the transition in.
Okay.
1 through the course of it, this was just not the ideal. We're a unique bird. We're a big entity, and that's not for everybody's taste. So 1 we lost it during the training portion. It was just too overwhelming. Now, as the manager spoke of, Augustine here, we expect people to be able to take calls. We expect people to be able to dispatch calls. So we do you have to wear a couple different hats in our center. And they occur in 2 different locations within the center. So trying to get up to speed of answering these calls was difficult for that individual. It wasn't the dispatch.
Takes a call and transfers it to another person who handles dispatch and that.
It's simultaneous. The minute that call's going in, that dispatcher has it and goes with it.
So as the call taker's entering it, dispatcher's already seeing it.
Already seeing
it.
Yeah, so it's not, they have to
Yeah.
call it, it already starts happening, so. And as the call taker's gathering more information, the dispatcher is generally feeding that back out to the agencies who are responding. So it's much faster, much more seamless than, the call taker doesn't have to call over to dispatch and make that happen. It already starts going.
So the caller doesn't call.
No,
It's not a
Caller
physical
only
transfer.
transfer.
There absolutely is not a physical transfer.
And
Does not occur.
under our old system, it was one person taking the call and dispatching.
No, I mean, when it was fully designed to be at staff, Dave could correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be the same type system where you're taking the initial call and as you're getting that call information, then someone is voicing that call to the troops on the road and to EMS or whoever would need that information is giving it at the same time. So that's.
Was that a verbal transfer or a digital on-screen transfer of information? Your operation?
They could see it digitally as well as here. I mean, you're in the same.
Yeah, right. If you're next to each other.
If you look at what JeffCom has compared to what the dynamics of like the layout that we had, it's, you're in a much smaller environment. There's not as much going on. So they're side by side,
Okay.
taking that information and if I'm correct, the call taker can hear, the dispatcher can hear what's going on as well to be able to get that information out. So they're just working hand in hand and getting that information out. So, and entering the CAT information for the call.
So a little perspective, if I may. When we first transitioned these agencies together in 2018, Brian was working with us and we believed we'd lose 40% during that transition. Everybody was offered the jobs, much like this. It was a little higher than that to us. So you're trying to train up, level up where you can, higher up. It was very similar here. We offered the positions. This is not everybody's cup of tea. And we certainly would have loved to have had all 4. It was 4, right, Dave?
temporary down to Florida. We had one that was working temporary.
Temporary.
that Moved to Oregon right after the transition.
Yeah, they were all offered the opportunity to come to us, but it was really no different than what we incurred back then. We lost a large percentage and we had to level up and train up to it. We're honored to have the one that we have. I think she's loving it and she is now wearing many different hats and expanding her horizons and doing a great job for us.
How many people are assigned to our pod and is it fully staffed?
Okay, so we're gonna have Jen speak to that here in a minute. The
Okay.
word pod gets thrown around and it got thrown around a long, long time ago. And I've tried to correct it where I can, but I'm gonna try to, let's see if we can't
Okay.
clarify some terminology. You have a console, not a pod. A console is where the radio, and do you have a photo of that?
Yeah, it's on the next page when we
Okay.
get there.
Yeah.
I can jump to that.
No.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, no.
okay.
I want to clarify that because the term pod has it indicates you've got a team working nothing for they're just handling Clear Creek calls. It's not the case. We can't discern when a phone call comes in where it's coming from. We can't tell if it's coming from Idaho Springs or Arvada. We don't know till we pick up that phone call. It pinpoints and maps for us where that call is coming from. Then we start putting together the jurisdictional location. So we don't know. What you have is a console occupied by a radio dispatcher. What you gained in this is at any given time, we have anywhere from probably 7 to 15 call takers taking calls throughout that floor. So you had a huge force multiplier over there. And now you have that same person that was working the channel here or trained personnel, they're handling that channel just like they always have. So the word pod got thrown out and the connotation is you've got this whole section of a building that's Clear Creek and Arvada has Arvada and Lakewood has Lakewood and JeffCo has JeffCo. It's not true. So I want to clarify that. And we're going to show you a picture of this. I'm happy to clarify any further. You have that radio position that you've always had. Handling 6 agencies, your law and fire from that location. But what you gained is all these other people taking calls. In a
So
more
if something happens and that one person is overwhelmed, you have other people in the center.
Then around them, we have other folks trained to provide support. Because of how our seating chart is, just over from this partition behind those computer screens that you're seeing are the mountain fire agencies. So all of a sudden, right there, you have Evergreen, you have Foothills, you have Genesee, and those are the agencies most likely to interact on that borderline over there. And they can provide further support for fire, or right on behind this, you have the sheriff's department, so can provide that law support. So that verbal insight communication that you spoke of is right there. Now we have it just tying a lot of organizations together.
Thank you.
But it's not a pod. It's a console. But you have a lot of call takers now.
Well, my understanding was that you have a group of people who, not everyone in your organization who you like to have generally involved in, granted, they can't see where the call is coming from, but that generally you try to have people. Your entire organization may not be able to be intimately familiar with the Clear Creek region.
That is correct.
It's a more remote, different region than most of the urban area. So I'm presuming that you have a way of focusing a certain team of talent that is primarily more focused on this area, if possible. Is there? Because I understood, and we understood from the beginning that it was not possible to have as insular a thing as a group of, however many people it took, replacing the people that did Clear Creek. Only Clear Creek, because you have to be able to surge where you're going to surge your help by the nature of your organization to wherever the greatest need is in that moment. So,
so if you remember earlier when Jen talked about, there were 16 folks that were specifically trained on Clear Creek and, more that specialty. So what you were talking about, really understand the geography, understand the procedures, et cetera. So that's kind of the cadre of folks that can rotate through that console and can rotate through those pieces. And in addition, we had to add the geography piece to the call taker training, not just for what we did for Clear Creek, but now all the dispatchers, right, that come in that respect. So yeah, so there are people who are specifically trained and who specifically staff at Clear Creek that have more of that geography knowledge, et cetera.
So it's not like you have, from those 16, you try to have X number of them who are working Clear Creek, because you don't have the technical capability to discern when the call comes in anyway. But what you try to have by having, you try to have enough people trained up, that there's always someone there for problem solving if somebody who's not trained up to that specific area runs into a glitch, a problem, a lack of familiarity. Is that a fair enough?
Yes, but there's also an additional piece. So there's two components. There's the call taking and then there's dispatch. The dispatch person is specifically working Clear Creek and that's what they're doing, right?
Okay.
When they're on shift, they're not floating around to other agencies, those kinds of things. The call takers are the ones that, because we don't know what the call is until it comes in, they're the ones that are more nebulous, right? They may take Clear Creek calls, they may take JeffCo calls, whatever it is. But once it becomes a Clear Creek call, that dispatcher who is dedicated to Clear Creek and working on Clear Creek and trained in Clear Creek takes it.
So the concept of pod is actually more like a virtual organizational thing rather than a clubhouse that the Clear.
Correct.
That's fair.
That's correct. So.
And I just want to speak to what I had mentioned earlier about when we were training people to take this Clear Creek console, that we focused on our JeffCo dispatchers first. And the reason being is they have that awareness. They have the experience with the rural geography. With JeffCo, they have like Pike National Forest, they have mountainous areas. They had that familiarity already. If you see this picture, this is the Clear Creek dispatcher here. This particular person does have experience with Jefferson County Sheriff's Office as well. So she has that previous knowledge. Behind her in another section of the dispatch center, there are 3 JeffCo dispatchers almost directly behind her. If something comes up that she is not aware of, she can refer to them. They can refer to her. They very, very much work as a seamless team, not just JeffCo and Clear Creek, but everybody over on the law and fire side. Like Jeff mentioned, with our mountain fire dispatchers being just on the other side of her, they very much work as a team, regardless of what type of call it is or where it's coming in at.
Good. Thank you. This helps me understand a recent complaint that I received and passed along, and I got a response from you all in 24 hours. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
This person made a call, described the location of the emergency, and then received some questions afterwards, can we have your name? Can we have your number? Like we might need to contact you later. And what they were concerned with was that the emergency wasn't being addressed while the call taker was asking those questions. And so this helps explain that while the call taker was asking additional questions, a dispatcher was over there already dispatching.
You're seeing it.
That's correct.
And it was kind of cool because I got a report right away that was like, on this minute, this happened, on that minute, that happened. And it looked like a really quick response, and an officer was there right away. This was a vehicle stalled on Floyd Hill.
So I think a big piece of that is just the awareness and the education, not only to our agencies and our responders, but to the public. So there is this kind of preconceived notion that somebody's taking the call, they're asking a bunch of questions. While they're asking questions, that's delaying a response. And that's not the case. As soon as they choose a call type as the call taker, that drops. They've got to have a location and a call type, and that drops available for our dispatcher to open up and start dispatching that particular call. I believe, if I remember correctly, because I was the one who sent that information, an officer was on scene within 4 minutes of the call dropping, which even in that location that's pretty quick.
What helps, and Clear Creek was no different. From the minute that call is picked up to the first keystroke to the minute that call's hung up, everything in that center is recorded. 100%. So we're able to answer these questions. The public, they don't like to have to tell you the location twice. The reason we do that is we have phase 1 locating through our mapping systems off your cellular towers, but we need to confirm from them, where are you? That's just an inherent delay, but that's a standard nationwide protocol. And people don't like to hear that. Just get them help. Get them there now. And those cause those, 10, 15, 20-second build-ins because it's only as good as fast as the reporting party can respond to that answer. But those are standard protocols. And a lot of people don't, why are you asking me so many questions? Why do you need my name? Well, in case the sheriff's office or fire need to contact you. Did you observe anything? A potential witness? We don't know.
So you mentioned growing pains. Finding certain things. And challenges that you met along the way. The report that you got from somebody telling you about that and expressing that concern is actually understandable and justifiable because people don't
I don't
know,
know.
nor can they be expected to know how a system works to get that far.
Sure.
So thank you for explaining things that help people better understand and allay their fears about things. It's simply a matter of not understanding how the system works. On the other hand, I know that if you're dispatching to a municipal responder, to a municipal address, that's a lot less challenging than if you're responding to a place that is probably on average, probably one of the steepest, some of the steepest terrain in Colorado, meaning that if you go even over to Grand and Summit County, when you get into the real mountains, you actually find out that they're far more pastoral. They just happen to have some trees too,
Sure.
broader valleys. So it's really tough in the unincorporated area of Clear Creek County, pretty much everywhere, if you're not familiar with the place, to really understand that terminology, be able to equate common names for things to the actual recorded name. So to further help people understand, I'm sure you've met some challenges and how are you responding to that? Because I'm sure there have been times that, no system works perfect all the time. So how are you responding to that? And what can you do to let people know that you ramped up to cover that general familiarity and information gap?
So I want to speak to that. Before I do, if I can just go back to the topic we were covering before as far as the response time for that particular call or inquiry that came in. Another thing that we see in that particular call, the caller was 3 miles out of that area already as well. And so another reason why we verify these locations with the caller is because they're not always still on scene or they're not where the emergency is. There are cases where somebody else gets like a text or a call from a family member saying they're in like a domestic violence situation, but that person who's calling us is not on scene with them. So that's another reason why we have to verify verbally the location, because the location that we may be getting from their cell phone is not the same location of the emergency. Just to make that clear that there are times where we have to send somebody to a different location than where our reporting party is calling from. And so we consistently ask to verify that location verbally twice on every phone call. And that is to meet our accreditation and our professional standards that we're held to.
I'd say like a major event that we did have, the fire was covered, but we had that snow closure.
Yes.
I think that was the big first test that we had as an agency. And for opening up an incident command, being able to have these calls filtered and know and be able to prioritize that, we were able to set up someone just prioritizing those calls as they came in to gauge our response. So by being able to have that information live and being able to see that, we're fortunate to get to some people that were stranded on 103 that probably wouldn't have made it through the night, because of that information and because they verify that information. So it made our job a lot easier as to the response to prioritize these calls to see where they were coming in. So I think that was the first real test, and we had a lot of success out of that. So because of being able to have that, being able to set up an incident command properly, not worrying about the calls coming in, but worrying about getting our response out.
I think it's safe to say that just about everybody sitting in this room was carrying a smartphone of some nature, Android or iOS. Technology has gone so far that if you're stationary and we have connectivity on here, I can find you within a meter. That's what technology is doing for us. Lost hikers, people on back roads, if they're able to get that call out and we're able to receive that call, we can pinpoint you on that very first screen through phase 1 routing, and we know where you're at. Now, if you start moving on us and we start losing connectivity, that gets a little sporty. But as long as we got you, we can pinpoint you.
And I want to build on that just a little bit because we have more resources than just the phase 1 location. Through our new phone system, Carbine, we can actually text the caller a link. If they click that link, it will give us the location directly from their cell carrier, assuming that they have service. If they don't have service, it will, once they click that, once they have service, we'll be able to get a closer location to them. The original location that comes in for us is going to be within a certain meter range, and that's location being given to us from a cell tower. By sending that link, and we also have specified up here, Rapid SOS, that's a location that comes directly from the cell carrier. So it is accurate within 1 meter. It also provides us with elevation. So if it's somebody who's in a building and there's an active shooter, an active robbery or something to where they can't speak and they get us that location through that link, we can see what elevation they're at as well within just a couple of feet. So we can try to determine what floor of the building they're on without them having to speak to us. In addition to that, we also provide all of our dispatchers, the new ones through the academy, and our seasoned dispatchers through ongoing training, materials, locations on Clear Creek. We've got all of our premise location and building names, all of your address points. We got those directly from your previous CAD system, and that was integrated with shape files through our IT team. So everything that you previously had in your CAD, we had access to. There are times when somebody calls in and they give us a location that we've never heard of. We don't know what that is. We don't know where that is. We have a lot of resources to be able to find that location. We can then send what we call a help desk ticket to our IT team, and they get it entered for us generally within 24 to 48 hours so that we have that additional address point there as well.
And this is like place names, right? This is.
Place names, yes.
I'm on Red Mountain. What do you mean you don't know what that is?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, or the pink pig, like right up Fall River.
Pig.
Yeah, I mean, things that made sense to our dispatchers that now they can be able to put that in and
Okay.
for the locals that would know that, right?
And we even took those odd place names like the pink pig. Those were in our geography training that we provided with our dispatchers so that somebody does say something that seems just different to us, they already have that prior knowledge. And we had similar instances with JeffCo as well. We'd have people call and say, I'm by the Red Barn. Well, how many red barns are in Jefferson County, right? So those are things that we can add to our CAD system if appropriate, if it's something that we're seeing quite a bit of. We also have what we call aliases in our CAD system. So Wadsworth, for example, this is just a very easy example, also known as 121. We have both of those names in there. Same with our other highways and other address points.
So you try to add common names as you learn them and
Yes.
Correct.
the system and update it to pick up what's old and what's new both coming in.
Yes.
Correct.
And I'm reading on at the top of the page, you started out with 1,200 premise locations.
We did, yes.
In addition to the base CAD maps. So that wasn't just, so we got the GIS maps from the county, but you already had a number of locations tracked in your system. So those were all added up front, and then they've continued to add since then.
I've been living here for 38 years and I would be shocked if I knew the location of half of those.
So we just jumped a little bit ahead. So I want to go back to page 3 real quick, if you don't mind. Another benefit to not only our citizens, but our responders that JeffCom has is we do send out surveys. If you want to see, yep, right there in the middle of the page, we send out surveys to our citizens. We do that for all of our agencies, not just Clear Creek. Clear Creek specific is right there in the middle, separated by agency. We send out surveys on specific call types. It's when they call 911 within, I believe, 24 hours, they are sent a survey to rate their call taker specifically, what kind of service they were provided. We send those out on like accidents, harassments, thefts. We're not going to send them out on homicides, suicides, that kind of thing, because we don't want to create more trauma than has already been created. However, we do want to know how we're doing. So if you can see in this chart here, for Clear Creek County Sheriff's Office in the 6-month time period, they've got a positive satisfaction score for our call takers at 87.21%. Our response rate on that, 41%, which you think that's probably pretty low out of 100, but that's actually a really good response rate. Not many people respond to us. We had 172 that responded, 87.21%. And then if you go down, Empire's at 100%, but they only had 3 people who responded. So they've got 100% satisfaction rate. However, we don't have a whole lot of data to compile because we didn't get a ton of response from them. Georgetown PD and then Idaho Springs. You can see Georgetown is sitting at 83.33% and then Idaho Springs sitting at 90.91%. These satisfaction levels are at or above JeffCom satisfaction levels as a whole, just so you have an awareness of that comparison. And then I just want to talk a little bit about the volume of calls for service. In the 6 months, we actually did this March 1st to August 31st. Clear Creek was not with us at March 1st, so this picks up on February 21st through August 31st of 2024. Clear Creek Fire had 890 calls for service and Clear Creek EMS had 810 calls for service. Sheriff's Office, 1,365, Idaho Springs PD, 1,011, Georgetown PD, 224, and Empire PD, 95. As a whole, I have a total number of 2,831 law calls and 1,761 fire EMS calls for service, totaling 4,592 in the 6 months, which averages about 765 calls a month over the 6 months time period. Just so we have a better idea of what that looks like. Down here on the bottom right-hand side, I just want to bring to your attention, when I spoke earlier about the mutual aid and the agencies coming together and kind of the process of what that looked like before, if a Clear Creek agency needed the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office for mutual aid or Evergreen Fire or anybody really from Jefferson County to come assist them on an incident, they would have to pick up the phone. When I spoke about the dispatch console up there, they no longer have to pick up the phone and call each other. They're not calling internally. They're clicking a button or using a command in our command line, in our power line, that automatically adds that agency. So there's no delay in service with a phone call or radio traffic. It is almost instant. So as you can see on the bottom right-hand side, we've got mutual aid calls for service from JeffCo law agencies into Clear Creek were 48 in that 6 months. 87 mutual aid calls for service from JeffCo fire agencies into Clear Creek. And then on the top right, 32 mutual aid calls for service from Clear Creek into JeffCo, and then 6 from Clear Creek Fire into JeffCo. So you can see there could be a potential for delay of service there when we're making phone calls, but with this CAD system, literally less than a second or two, and that agency has been added.
I have to guess a number of those are on that complicated fire boundary line on Floyd Hill.
Yes, and I want to just bring to our number one, not number one, but in our top like call types for service, we have a huge amount of accidents on the highway there, and so that's where that mutual aid comes in. This doesn't include Colorado State Patrol, which is also involved. But motor vehicle collisions in that 6 months period, we had 252 of them. That's a big number, and that's where that mutual aid is imperative to get there very quickly. So moving to, we can skip page 4 just because we already spoke about the console layout. One very small additional piece that I want to add is we are going to a new building. It's going to be in first quarter of next year, 2025. We're currently sitting at 42 consoles in our center, and that is divided between the fire law dispatchers and our call takers. When we transition to our new building in 2025, we will have 52 consoles. So that will allow for that number Jeff spoke to about increasing our staffing. We already spoke on our location tools as well. So that is all I have for you, unless you have additional questions that I can address.
I think one thing that's really important to address too is that survey, at 87%, right? Like, I think the one concern was moving from a local dispatch center that we had, that the quality of care to our community would be different, right? Because it wasn't physically housed in Clear Creek. So, I mean, I think our satisfaction rate with our current, when we had dispatch, was probably right in the same realm. So I feel like it's important to highlight like the quality of service that is coming out, even though it's not directly in the county, is still at a high number. So I mean, that was the number one concern I think that we had with moving, you know, and losing that service that, you know, our community would lost in a big system. And I think that really highlights the fact that we're getting a high satisfaction rate and it's benefit to the officers and it's benefit to the community.
My guess would be that as time goes forward and I know how I am, you tend to, if I expect to hear something, I think I heard it, whether it was said or not, I mean, you interpret the way, you know, things the way. So I imagine as people become more aware, well, hopefully this will be this, you know, the proof's in the pudding as far as performance too, because that'll have an impact. But as people become more aware and have fewer fears, maybe they become more familiar and they understand things. You know, we had public that is simply because they're not involved, just like I'm not involved in what they do. They thought things like, you know, well, now that response is going to Jeff go, it'll take longer for them to respond and things like that. And it's easy after a little while to begin to say, oh yeah, if I'm calling, it doesn't matter if I'm calling somebody in Maine or calling somebody next door down the street. The phone rings at the same time when I push the button, you know, that kind of a thing. So that as people become familiar and understand it's the same team responding, it's just a different communication route. Then it just comes down to how well your team can perform with enough familiarity to our area to know that we don't have glitches of misdirection or something like that. And so I would expect that you know, citizen satisfaction will become greater as people become more familiar with the details and presuming that performance continues to improve always, hopefully. So.
And I just want to
It's effective at this time. I'm just saying, you know, you always try to get better.
Certainly.
I just want to add a couple pieces to that is as far as the programs that were available in Clear Creek, those have not gone away either. We have the Safe Call program. We've been able to implement that and utilize that for citizen group that what am I trying to say? That volunteers to be a part of that. So the Safe Call is there's certain citizens that may need extra help. And so we call and check on them if we have not heard from them every day. I think we currently have 4, Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, 4 on the list as of right now.
Down to 3, but I'm trying to get a 4th back up.
Okay, down to 3 right now. And they either call or email us every morning just to let us know that they are safe, they're alive, they're doing good. If we don't hear from them by 11 a.m., then we send the troops out there to check on them. Clear Creek also utilized the school safe system. We are getting onto the school safe system as well. We're going to be able to test that and implement that. There was just a little delay there due to some contact information, but we've gotten that all taken care of. We're able to utilize school safe. So all of the programs, the search and rescue group that was able to be utilized, we have all of that as well. And so none of that has left.
Do you all, you folks have, we're looking at last year sort of response time data. Do you guys have any response time data prepared?
We do not. That's not our objective. We deal with answer times.
Right.
Response times rest solely with the police departments and fire agencies, sheriff's departments. That's a factor we can't control.
Of course.
I hope you understand that. We can put the call out to them, but you take down in the urban setting, we can air a call. They may not get to it for 30 minutes. That's impacting.
Thank you. And I meant to ask about the time that you have. What's the phrase that you use for what's in your control?
We can deal with our answering times, our call times. So our objective is to hit 90% of our 911 calls are answered in 15 seconds or less. Now, that was a standard set a long time ago by the professional organizations, and I think APCO set that one. And then we want 99% of our 911 calls answered in 40 seconds or less. Now, those are the 2 benchmarks we aim for.
Define answered.
Picked up, hello, 911, how,
So your first initial.
hello,
is
voice
between,
contact.
is a couple of the criteria, 50
Well,
seconds, 40
That
seconds.
calls in our queue. When it drops into our queue, that ticker's ticking.
Okay,
So within 15 seconds of that hitting our queue, we want a person on the phone with them
okay.
within that metric. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So we match that for all of our agencies. Now, where we are today, and we just went to a new phone system, we've got an awful lot of training on there. We have been at and above our metric standard of 90% of our calls at or above in 15 seconds, 90% or above. Right now, I think as of today, we're about 88 and change, 89 and change. We're right there. Now, this is the difference of potentially of about 5 phone calls. You know, and it's a numbers game. We're always following our data pattern on how those calls are coming in, time of day. You could take one traffic accident at an intersection, even up here, that's going to generate 15 phone calls, all 911s. Well, if I have 12 call takers, 3 over here might be answered at 20 seconds, 25 seconds.
The other thing I want to mention is that when you get, for example, the windstorms that you had on April 6th and April 7th, you know, the increase in calls in those days was 1,500, I think, a day more than you normally get, right? And so even if you have a bad day like that where things might be delayed, you might go from a 90% that month to an 89% or an 88%, right? Even just based on a couple of days. So, but the metrics have generally still been there.
And in addition to the call, sorry,
Go
Jeff,
ahead.
in addition to the call answer times and metrics that we're holding our call takers to, we also have dispatch standards that we hold our dispatchers to. So for example, a call that comes in and the way we classify it is priority 1 call, which is urgent, in progress, happening right now, needs an emergent response. That call needs to be dispatched by that dispatcher less than 60 seconds from it being in their pending queue. So they need to be able to read the call, discern what's happening, choose the appropriate resources, and then get them headed that way, or air the call and get it sent out to the road so that they can be on their way. Sorry, Brian, for fire calls, it's 30 seconds. For fire medical related calls, it's 30 seconds.
I do want to mention that all these metrics are published monthly on the JeffCom website. So there's a packet that goes out every month that has the overall performance against the SLAs and then by agency. So you'll be able to go and look at the Clear Creek agencies, for example. The challenge with that is it's the same thing that Jeff said earlier. When a call first drops, we don't know who it's for. Right. And so many of the metrics are reported at the overall JeffCom center level. The ones we can break down to each individual agencies are then broken down. So every month, and then there's quarterly and annual reports that go out there as well. You can see those metrics and any citizen can go on and see them.
And I think one last question I have, and it's for the edification of people here. You know, there are a lot of things that we know before we call that they're lower priority. And generally we call the non-emergency line because we don't want to gum up emergency response with somebody's chronically parked over here
Right.
and I'm done with it. You know, that kind of call, that kind of stuff. How are those calls routed? Where do they go? The non-emergency calls.
They go to our same group of call takers that take the emergency calls. And just to get a little more granular, we have 2 different positions within call taking in our center. One of them is a communications specialist. So they take administrative calls only. They can very well take an emergency call on an administrative line. However, we do have that divide there. So we have different queues that the calls drop in. So our communication specialists take only administrative calls. Our emergency communication specialists take both emergency and non-emergency calls. And so they could get 2 non-emergency calls and then they could get a 911. They just drop in as they're in the queue. It's an automatic call distribution system.
And do they know where do they know non-emergency? Does the person answering the call, the initial answerer receiving the call, do they know whether it's a emergency or non-emergency line coming in?
Yes.
They do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Good.
it has a different identifier on the phone, and we do get non-emergent items on 911 lines and vice versa. So there are times when we have a heavy influx of 911 calls and they're on the phone with somebody on a 911 line that does not have an emergency. They're able to put them on hold, answer a next 911 call, ask if it's emergency, and then go back to the previous caller as they need to.
Some of you I know have been in the JeffCom center, but there's actually screens all over the center that if there's a 911 call on hold, it's visibly and audibly seen everywhere. So it's very rare that happens, that it stays on hold very long because of that. And so there's been a lot of things that JeffCom's put in place to make sure those calls get answered the right way.
I don't think I have any more questions. I've drug this out long enough.
So I am looking at your monthly reports, and thank you, and I see they're published through May. I would be really interested to see something prepped for our agencies once you have the data to encompass like the 6-month period. And what I'd like to see is just kind of how those numbers looked early, how they've changed over time. We're not going to have that today, but that's like a sort of something that I would love to see. I don't know if it means that you all need to come back up and present to us, but maybe we can have the sheriff's office.
So,
show us that.
Sheriff stepped out. Monthly, I send to all agencies, 31 different agencies. I send a monthly report to them. Contained in that monthly report are all of the individual Clear Creek agencies.
Okay.
Now you'd have to go between Page, Idaho Springs, Empire, and add them up, collect cumulatively, if that's what you would like to do. I'd be more interested to hear from you, exactly what you'd be looking for. We produce an annual report, we produce quarterly reports. Every agency is laid out of what their volume has been attributed to them, types of calls, priority 1s, 2s, 3s on down. We break that out for the agencies. And that's being sent to the sheriff monthly now.
What I'm hearing is stay tuned for the annual report.
And the quarterly reports as well, because it's all going to be contained. Through agreements, I have to produce quarterly and annually reports.
That's fine. I'm not asking for anything in addition to that.
I share a monthly with you.
Yeah, we ask the sheriff's office regularly, how are things going?
Mhm.
And what I hear is things are going fine.
Yeah, we could supply you that report, the monthly report that we get to show kind of what the volumes are and what that's been for the month.
If those monthly reports were showing a problem, we'd probably hear about it.
Correct.
And I apologize. You just advised me that's to May. I'll get that updated because I just sent them a monthly report last week.
I don't mean that as a complaint.
No, it's a complaint
Sounded like it to me.
because it should be there. I'll take that.
I mean, updating websites is.
No, I think it's good for the public to be informed too.
The August report has been issued. The agencies have it. So
Yes.
yeah.
And if anything comes up additionally, you can always reach out to Under Sheriff Brown. He can reach out to me and I can provide him, like the inquiry that you had where I provided you all of the data for that one call. If you have anything like that, you can reach out to me at any time and I can get him that additional data or whatever it is you're looking for.
And I think it's important to add too, that we do like a monthly ops meetings with all first responders and that's great. And then JeffCom's going to be represented and coming to those now. So on a smaller level, we're able to then to get in the same room and discuss any issues and be able to work on the smaller detailed stuff that we might be having issues with and then be able to work on that service. So that's nice that they're able to come up and support us just like CDOT would in that setting. So.
Okay, I have one more comment on the emergency side, which is that I asked, in preparation for this, I asked the fire authority what their thoughts were. I'm happy to report the fire authority is very satisfied. They're saying their turnout times are better than they've ever been under your system. So, and I think turnout time is the amount of time from when they know they need to get somewhere to when they're in the truck and they're on the way.
That's right.
So happy to have heard that. Want to make sure that the public and the board knows about that.
How is that impacted by the performance of JeffCom, the turnout time? From the time they learn, that's when the dispatch goes to them. And why is their turnout time better? I wonder from the moment they get the call from dispatch to when they're out the door.
I could address part of that. Procedurally, how JeffCom drops the tones on it is a little bit more streamlined and efficient than having our one person taking the 911 call. If, say, for instance, it was a crash on the highway, more than one 911 calls coming in, the radio operators started taking the second 911 call. That slowed down a lot of the fire calls for us when we had our own comm center. Dispatch with the skeleton economy of having 12 call takers on, they get that call up, it drops a little bit quicker. Their goal is 30 seconds. There, once they have the location and call type, our goal was a minute. It was within professional standards, but the procedures and scale of the economy is well within their wheelhouse.
Well, thanks.
And just for clarification, that's Dave Straley from the sheriff's office, in case the record did not.
Can't see him from way over here.
Yeah, and thank you. Mitch, do you have anything to add? I know it can be hard to jump in while you're on Zoom. Mitch is our, the third member of our board.
I'm curious if call length has any analytic value as you look at your operations.
You want me to mention or you?
Go ahead.
So it is something that we look at. So call duration leads to staffing numbers. And so, if you're getting less calls, but they're longer duration, it's just the same as getting more. So we look at it on a regular basis to help drive those staffing numbers. Jeff mentioned earlier that the center is going to be adding 18 more personnel. There's really two reasons for that. One is the overall call volume month over month has been going up. And it's been a consistent trend for this year, as well as in some cases durations. And so that leads to those overall staffing numbers.
Thank you.
My last comment is just on the non-emergency side. I think this is where I think there are some credible complaints from the community on the non-emergency side. I've heard stories from people that I don't think make things up about getting directed to the non-emergency line, being put on hold for 3 minutes and then having the call be disconnected and having that happen multiple times in a row. So that is something that I think really we need to continue to work on. We spent the majority of this presentation focusing on the emergency side, because that's the most important thing, is when you call and you have an emergency, someone's showing up to save your life. But I do think that this is something to dig into, not just to ask for improvement in your systems and wrap our heads around what's happening there, but I think there's something locally that we can work on as well. It used to be that non-emergency line, I mean, one of the complaints I got was somebody who saw a bunch of emergency activity pass their house and the next morning wanted to call somebody and just say, hey, what happened? And under the old system, that was a possibility, right? And people could sort of get the information they needed and understand what was happening in their neighborhood. And I think that's a service that our people value and expect. And I think whether it's figuring out a tighter connection here or how to offer that service just purely locally through the sheriff's office, I think that's kind of the next thing to look at is how do people contact us when they don't have an emergency, but they need some information or need to pass along some information, like directly to the sheriff's office or Evergreen Fire or. Do you guys have any comments on that? Go ahead.
Well, just internally, so even as of yesterday, so the same non-emergency numbers still exist. When we merged our system from our center over to JeffCom, there was a problem with one of the accounts not moving over, so we lost calls during that span. And then as recently as yesterday, there's an issue with our Zoom system. So if you were called from your cell phone number, you could get JeffCom direct. But internally, if you call, say, the sheriff's office reception desk, and then she tries to transfer you, that call was going and it was being like 3 minutes without it being answered. And so that was an internal issue that we have with our Zoom system that we found out about yesterday that we're working on.
This is probably what I just heard about this. So.
Correct.
Let me add to that. I mean, as great as technology is, can we agree we like it? Yeah. Can find you within a meter. Sometimes it's a hot mess. JeffCom went to a new phone system July 31st of this year. Now, Carbine is absolutely the state of the art. And we're one of the few agencies in the country driving that high-end technology. About the time you go over to a new platform of technology, what generally happens? You find out all the bugs that exist. So trying to swing trunk lines and relocate phone numbers, systems has been a growing pain and has been a high acuity attention for us over the past month and a half. We're still working on it. So I would profess to you with those complaints, we're probably more so through the month of August and probably even maybe a few recent. But you didn't hear those complaints probably prior to that too much of a 3-minute call hold. Okay.
Not that specific.
Not that specific complaint. Our bot has offloaded 189,000 calls without me opening
roughly,
that up,
just-
roughly.
yeah.
So you can get into the bot, a non-emergency number, And it's AI technology. It's learning as it goes and knows how to route those calls. You know, talk to the representative of the sheriff's department. It would route that call right to them if that's what they say. That's the AI technology within that. And that's taking those calls off our floor. We are seeing that through improvements, reprogramming off this new phone system, we're capturing those 3-minute kickers. We don't want that to happen, and that's never going to be our standard. It's not our standard. And we just did a big upload of a bunch of numbers last Friday that has resolved a lot of that even this week. Now, that'll be a work in progress. We're committed to fixing that, but the public can get to us, they can get to them. It's just a matter of us just working out a few little chases with technology. But I appreciate every bit of that, and we don't want them on hold for something as simple as, you know, what happened down my street last night. We want to give them that answer. We can give it, or they can give it.
Okay, thank you. I think that's where I see room for improvement. I think it feels to me on our side like maybe it's a little bit of like a HR policy issue, like who's owning which calls, which things. And I think we need to figure that out. And I think on our side too, like we used to have somebody that sat there and looked at the phone and waited for it to ring, right? And then the mind stopped producing so much and we started figuring out how to be efficient. And that was one of the things we lost. So now you get into a phone tree when you try to call the county clerk. And I think so like organization wide, including how we integrate with JeffCom, I think this is a conversation worth having about when people need to contact our government via the phone, how do they do that? And so just sort of want to leave that there as what I view as kind of the next steps, because it looks like the emergency side, which is the most important, is going very well. That's what I'm hearing from the sheriff. That's what I'm hearing from Clay Creek Fire. I would welcome any comment from, I just looked at Lynette and realized if you have any comment, please feel free.
I believe we're experiencing the same. I think there were some very long polls, but I believe they were on non-emergency calls. And so at least I hope, you know, sometimes by the time the story filters all the way up to electeds, it's not always as clear as you'd like. And the details that are necessary to go into the system and fix. But as long as there's communication amongst all of our first responders, I think we're headed in the right direction. I haven't heard as many call failures. The one thing I did hear when we had the fire up near the mobile home park on Red Mountain or Red Elephant Mountain was that there were some glitches in how whose radios were being, what system was being used for communication, who was supposed to make calls. But it was worked out at the time. And I think I think the fire authority has figured out that, okay, this is how we ended up doing it and dealing with it. Here's how we would prefer, this is a better way to respond. So I'm confident that things will smooth out and trying to think, we just wanted to, you know, in Georgetown, there was a period of time, I think, when our officer, because he's on his own right now, we don't have the new chief on board, and he was feeling like, you know, if he got somebody who was frustrated about the length of time it took to get any kind of response, people were trying him on his cell phone, which is not the way it's supposed to work. We don't want that to be the first thing that people end up calling, because they've all heard that there's difficulty if they're calling JeffCom. So I think things are smoothing out. I hope that's not going to become the preferred method, because that's not what our board has concerns about, that becoming the standard practice, and for obvious reasons.
Sure.
So I think I'm hearing good things. Amanda, if you have anything? I think you got most of it. Okay, cool. I know Mary Smith is on Zoom as well. If she has anything, she could chime in. But those are Georgetown concerns.
trying to promote Mary to panelist if she wants to say something.
I'm sure if Mary had a comment, she would raise her hand.
She is rejoining as panelist.
Mary, welcome. Any comments or questions from you? Mary Smith, Board of Selectmen, Georgetown.
Sorry, as I was switching over, I didn't hear you in the in-between, but I'm good with what I have.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you guys for coming up and doing this with us. This has been a big change for our community and a lot of attention paid to it. And so you might see us continue over this transition period to bring these kinds of questions and be a little bit more needy maybe than some of your longtime members. So thank you.
Not a
Thank you.
chance. Thanks for having us.